Today we're going to install the EngineStat on a very unusual vehicle, 1962 Jeep FleetVan. Now this little van, as you can see here, was used back in the 60s to deliver mail and for other government purposes. Sold mostly to the government. It's very unusual in its design. Lots of glass, big doors on the side, good area in the back to store boxes. This van needs a complete restoration, but for a while, we'd like to drive around, go to car shows, show it off during the restoration period. So we're going to show you how to put an EngineStat in this kind of car. And it's very unusual because this little van actually has a Chevy 350 crate motor inside of it. And it has virtually no instrumentation at all. These things were made with just the bare bones in terms of, you can see the unusual design of the cab. We've taken off the engine cowl. You can see the engine. Normally, the Jeep FleetVan from the 60s would have a very simplistic instrument cluster with literally just a speedometer, a indicator light for oil, and an indicator light for current from the alternator. This particular case, someone has added an oil pressure gauge and a water temperature gauge, neither of which work. But we still want to drive this around. There's good access to the engine compartment here. So we'll walk through the EngineStat installation bit by bit and show you how easy it is. Then we're going to mount a little temporarily. One of the our tablet products, our 7-inch tablet. So the owner of this little van can monitor engine, see engine RPM, they can see engine vacuum, they can see radiator temperature, they can see charging voltage without modifying really anything. And it'll also give that alarm function so that when something goes wrong, if this big 350 starts to leak oil or has an oil pump problem or it runs low on oil, right now they have absolutely no visibility. That can happen. This thing can burn up and they won't even know it. But with EngineStat, they'll know it. And they'll know it in enough time to stop the engine from destroying itself. Well, we'll just show you a little bit of the inside. This very unusual vehicle. Used to see these a lot on the streets in the 60s. Very nice glass. Needs complete restoration. But again, for today, we're just going to put the EngineStat, and we're going to demonstrate some of the great functions of the EngineStat and how easy it is to install. Perfect application for ultimately this van will be completely restored back to original condition, which showed almost no instrumentation. So really kind of unsafe to drive. But we'll have that. We'll have an LCD display here for monitoring those vital engine parameters. Here we are ready to install the EngineStat. As you know, our EngineStat kit comes complete with the EngineStat module, which will tuck right here into the engine compartment out of sight. It also comes with all the wiring that you would need pre-terminated, so it's very easy to hook up and just cut and trim the length. Comes with the temperature monitor. EngineStat monitors engine vacuum, engine RPM, engine radiator temperature, and also battery voltage, and most importantly, oil pressure sensor health and oil pressure sensor status. Now, we'll also use, in this particular installation, we'll use the MPEAS ADPT, which is an adapter kit. That's for use in cases where you have a car that has an oil pressure gauge, but you also want to add EngineStat, because EngineStat gives you that alarm before you can see any problem on your gauges or your oil indicator light. And it'll also give you alarms under circumstances of too high temperatures, oil pressure problems, wiring harness problems, lots of things. So first thing we'll do is we'll find out where we want to mount the EngineStat module, which will just be probably right over here in the right under the wiring harness. We'll connect the tachometer and the battery. The tachometer is very easy. This particular engine has an integrated Delco ignition, which the integrated coil pack right on top. Right over here is a tach input terminal. We simply will wire our EngineStat straight up to that terminal. We'll wire our EngineStat to the ground and power of the battery cable there, and then we'll connect a vacuum of our EngineStat to this little port right here. And then we'll put our temperature sensor in the radiator fins, probably over here right by the hose. And then we'll connect up our oil pressure sensor. There, as I said, there's an existing oil pressure sensor right here, a mechanical type, very unreliable. Well, it's difficult to see, but right down there, very unreliable, difficult to use. But we will add the adapter kit to that, and add the EngineStat sensor, and still be able to use the old-fashioned mechanical sensor as well. Now we're going to install the EngineStat adapter kit for the oil pressure sensor. This 62 Jeep van has an oil pressure sensor that's a mechanical type. It's a tube that runs back to the back of the motor where the oil pressure opening is. Most cars are this way. The oil pressure sensor will be somewhere on the block. Don't confuse it with the temperature sensor, which is normally at the front of the engine, close to a water source, near the water neck, etc. So we're going to remove this, install the adapter kit. The adapter kit is pictured here. And we have the fittings that we need, and we'll be able to install that and preserve the existing gauge while adding the EngineStat gauge. And use the adapter here. This is available at any hardware store like Home Depot. Little T adapter, a little extension. The original mechanical oil pressure gauge had this little adapter, so we've just reused that. And then we'll connect the system back up, and we'll also connect in our EngineStat oil pressure sensor switch by using this adapter that comes with the adapter kit, and the switch itself, which comes with the adapter kit. We'll have connection to the mechanical gauge and a connection to the EngineStat electronic gauge. Alright, here's the finished installation of the oil pressure adapter. And remember, you only need all these pieces if you have an oil pressure gauge already. In this case, you can see through the T connector that we have our mechanical oil pressure gauge. We have an adapter that comes with the adapter kit and the EngineStat pressure sensor switch. In a moment, we will connect the EngineStat to this terminal, and we will be ready to go. Okay, we've trimmed the white wire from our EngineStat to the proper length. We simply plug that into the EngineStat pressure sensor. And later on, we'll dress the wires. Over here, this is where the EngineStat will rest. These are the connectors. We'll place the box in there after we're finished. Next, we'll hook up the tachometer. Tachometer for this ignition system is self-contained. There's actually a tach terminal right here. We'll simply plug a male terminal in here, connect it to our yellow wire from the EngineStat, and that'll be that. Okay. This tachometer input is a male spade on the distributor. It's built-in coil here. Most classic cars have little screw terminals, and we provide ring terminals. Your car has a tachometer input like this, or integrated electronic ignition like this, you might need a different kind of connector. In this case, we'll use a little spade connector, standard spade, that's available just about anywhere. In this case, we'll use a little spade connector, available anywhere, that will go right in to the terminal there marked tach. Connect the EngineStat black and brown wires. The black wire goes to the battery ground. It can actually go to any chassis ground, but it seems most convenient to connect it right up to the battery terminal ground. We crimp on the large metal connectors. The brown goes onto the battery positive. This particular battery has a nice little terminal here, and you notice that we have the battery disconnected while we're wiring up the EngineStat. We're going to go ahead though and connect the black wire to the negative terminal, and over here we'll connect the brown wire to the positive terminal. Okay, you can pause. Now we're going to insert the EngineStat's temperature sensor. The EngineStat comes with a temperature sensor, and very easy to install. You put it next to the top radiator hose as close as possible, and you insert it between the fins of the radiator. You notice on this late model radiator, this is not a classic car radiator, the fins are very close together. That's okay. We'll simply file on each edge of the EngineStat fin terminal, which is how the heat is delivered to the EngineStat sensor, and then we'll be able to slide that in. So I'm just going to go get a little file it just a little bit on each side evenly, and slide that in there. Okay, I've filed it a little bit. You could file about 3/4 of an inch up from the top edge here. File it evenly on both sides, and don't file too much. Don't file past that little line that you see underneath there. Now that we've got it fitting in the radiator, we'll use a little thermal grease. This grease is included in your kit. This will help give you a more accurate number. We put it as close as possible to the radiator hose, and we just slide it right in there. And that's that. See that we've attached the yellow wire, which goes to the tachometer, also the coil negative, sometimes referred to, the brown wire, which goes to battery positive. We've brought our temperature sensor over here from the radiator, and that is very simple. That simply just plugs in. Plug and play, absolutely no wiring to do there. You can just plug it in until it clicks. We've also connected our red wire to the coil positive, the black wire to the battery ground or chassis ground. In this particular installation, we have a little bit of repair to do because it's a restoration, but this blue wire will connect to the oil pressure harness. All right. Now, though, we're going to connect up the vacuum line. You see here on this particular engine, we have a nice vacuum port that is unused right there. We're just going to remove the T from here and plug it in directly to the vacuum line. Okay. A vacuum line to a vacuum port on the manifold. We have an unused manifold port right here on this engine. Notice it's a pretty big port, so we just made a little adapter with a piece of hose and a little vacuum adapter, which you can get at any auto supply store. And there we go. So now we have the vacuum connected. So we will tuck our EngineStat away in the corner here and test it out. Okay. Completed the installation. The EngineStat is installed, neatly wired up. Very easy to do, as you can see from the rest of the video. Now we're going to put the engine cover on and take it for a little test drive. The ignition on, but not started the engine, and we can see the EngineStat is running. Let me turn the ignition off, and you'll see what it looks like with ignition off. With ignition off, you see in just a moment you'll see a gray screen that says ignition is off. You know at that point the module is off. Turn the ignition on, but not start the engine, and in a moment it'll show the black grid with all the different measurements. You can see here we have oil pressure at the top, temperature, battery, oil indicator, RPM, and settings. Let's go to the settings screen, verify that we have it set for 8 cylinders, which is correct for this car. Just to demonstrate, I'll change the temperature for the alarm. We'll leave it on gauge set number 1. We'll show what that means in a moment. Now we'll look at the name. We want to name our We want to name our EngineStat. We don't want to just leave it at that name. We'll call it the Jeep van. Now, anytime we drive, we'll see the name of this car. I can have multiple classic cars using the same EngineStat application, the same phone, the same tablet. One of the awesome things is that if I turn this sideways, I'll see instrumentation here. There are my instruments. I can see that the engine is off. I have voltage, I have vacuum, I have engine RPM, and I have a temperature right there. So right now we're going to start the engine. Since this is sort of a hot-rodded minivan, meaning there is no real muffler, it'll be a little bit noisy. Okay, now we can see engine vacuum here is working properly. We can see battery voltage right there, a little bit more than 13 volts. There's our engine RPM, and there's our temperature. Of course, it's cold, we just started it. So, when we drive this little van, we'll be able to put it right here. We'll put a little stand up there, and we'll have full instrumentation. Could you tell me when to start? We have our little 7-inch monitor, and we made a little stand to hold it there. Later on, when we have a chance, we're going to connect a charger to it so that whenever the car is on, the system will be on. There's a little application we use called Auto Sleeper, which will automatically turn the tablet on or off depending on the state of the ignition. And then with EngineStat installed, it will be like a virtual dashboard for our car. Most importantly, even on our phones, even now, we will be able to see and hear alarms without even looking at this instrument. So in my pocket is my cell phone, and it will tell me exactly what's going on. All right, well, we're going to put the engine cover on and take it for a little test drive. For a little spin here with the EngineStat. You can see the EngineStat is working. We've got vacuum, we've got engine RPM, we've got battery voltage, and we've got our temperature. Ramp the engine up a little bit, see things change. It looks like it's working good. Now, one of the great advantages of EngineStat is I don't have to be looking at this. I have the phone in my pocket. It'll give me an alarm. I'm just going to drive around the parking lot a little bit. Let's see it work.